I made a mistake. In 7 days, a demon or a dark goddess will possess my body and I will disappear. What have I done? It all started when I was doom scrolling in bed, watching TikToks after a hard day at work. My boss and supervisor hated me. I didn't want to be here anymore. Flicking through influencers with perfect lives, people begging for money, and various not-so-subtle ads to click someone's damn affiliate link. I'm not sure how the algorithm decided to show me this. Maybe it heard me tell a friend I was desperate for a change, willing to try just about anything. But I found a spell on TikTok that would help me gain everything I ever wanted. Money, fame, love, everything. The account name was Regina Inferni. I'd seen her videos come up before. I figured I had nothing else to lose by attempting it. At the end of the video, she said, "Beware. Some people aren't ready to gain all they truly desire. See you next time," and blew a kiss at the screen. I put it on repeat, watching it for a while, and figured it was worth a shot. I had to memorize the lines or incantation. I'm not sure if it's an evocation or invocation, but either way. Screenshotting the instructions for reference, and I texted a friend about it, telling her what I intended on doing. She was interested in this sort of thing, and was surprised that I was going to attempt it. She told me not to do it, and to be careful. I didn't have to wait to conduct the ritual, fortunately having everything I needed already. Gathering them all together, and placing them on a black folded towel, a large black pillar candle, a strand of my hair including the root, I pulled out with a wince, a vial of my menstrual blood, some wine in a pre-opened bottle, a bowl, a sharp knife, a cup, and I copied the symbol, or what I discovered was a sigil on a piece of paper. I had to be naked, or sky-clad as they said, so locking the door so my roommates wouldn't just come in was essential. I didn't want to be disturbed, nor receive any strange questions about my activities. I had the bowl ready. Using a sharp knife, I cut the tips of my 3 middle fingers, wincing sharply, pressing them, and allowing the blood to trickle into the bowl. The video said it had to be a decent amount, squeezing my fingers more, and finally, there was enough. Sucking them to stop the bleeding, a part of me wondered what the hell I was doing. I lit the candle by striking a match. The flames flickered highly and brightly. I added my menstrual blood to the mixture, stirring it, trying to ignore what it was, painting my forehead in the blood with the symbol, between my breasts and on my pubis. I couldn't believe I was actually doing it. Shivering from doing the ritual in winter, and the ritual calling for no distractions, no heating, no devices, nothing. Pouring the wine into the chalice, stirring it clockwise with my finger 3 times. On my knees, I held the cup up like a chalice, a sacred offering up into the air, and I had to forget how silly this must have looked. It didn't even flow, nor did it rhyme. O great being from below, fill me with your blessing. Use my body as a vessel for all time. May you, O great one, give me the riches of my heart. Great and terrible ruler, queen and mistress of all unseen, she who rules for eternity. I use this blood to bind us, wine and blood as an offering, O great and mighty destroyer, and forever I yield to you. Bringing it to my lips and drinking the blood mixed with wine, swallowing it down and tilting my head backward, closing my eyes. I expected to see or hear a sign to let me know the ritual had worked. Some message of the infernal divine to tell me I'd done the right thing. Instead, I just felt silly, wiping the excess away with the back of my hand. I started to wash it off, blowing out the candle, and watched while the smoke twisted high, rinsing out the cup, and lifted the strand of hair, realizing I hadn't even used it in the ritual, and placed it in the bin. A sharp, sudden exhaustion flooded through me. My limbs felt heavy, and walking to bed, plonking myself on the surface, I immediately fell asleep. Surrounding me were an array of ghastly, terrifying faces, with their hands reaching out to me from the eerie shadows. They moaned and whispered, cursed in ancient tongues, and I screamed at them to leave me alone. I tried to push past them, only to have awakened with feelings of being crushed. I knew I had made a mistake. Day 1. Laying on my back, staring up at the ceiling fan, with the morning sun peering in through the window. My limbs felt weak, heavy, and I rubbed my eyes with a drained yawn, reaching out to pull the cord to close the blinds, sharply shut, and felt at ease in the dark. It wasn't abnormal for me not to wake up in the morning. My mind kept wondering about the dream I had last night. Rolling over, I texted my friend and told her I did it, and nothing happened except a weird nightmare. I had another message from the work group chat demanding I come in early and work late today. Naturally, they wouldn't be paying me more. I was lucky to even have a job in this economy, but that didn't mean I had to like it. I hated being stuck in a dead-end job. Curious, I checked the person's profile I got the spell from. Regina Inferi, one of the more prominent witch talkers on the app. There are 2 new videos promoting a necklace of some kind. Rolling my eyes, I flicked away and doom scrolled before getting up. I couldn't rot in bed all day. Walking into the bathroom, leaning on the sink and staring into my reflection, there were still traces of red and black outlines where the symbols had been on my forehead, chest, and pubis. I didn't realize I hadn't managed to clean it all off. Turning on the faucet and first using some water, it didn't work. Then I used makeup remover and started rubbing my hands together and washing my face, only to find that that too didn't work. I didn't have time to worry about it, but I scrubbed those sites in the shower, hoping it would fade. My shower went as normal, my alarm ringing to let me know I was late. After drying my face and body, checking in the mirror, and yes, it was still there. Using concealer to hide the worst of it, and finishing the rest of my look. You didn't notice the marks unless you were looking intently. The only thing I saw that was remotely spooky was a feeling of being watched from the shadows or the corners of the room. I guess spending all my time watching this kind of content had taken its toll. Closing the bathroom door to keep it out, I kept feeling like someone or something was standing there, waiting for me to come out. When I opened the door and walked out into the hallway, I discovered, surprise, surprise, no one. I readied myself for work, grabbed my keys and headed out. It was a normal day, other than a weird feeling in the pit of my stomach. Coming home, I ate, cleaned myself up, and went to bed. I think it worked. Who knows? Maybe I'll try another one in the future. My life can't get any worse. Day 2. Waking up with a groan and stretching my arms and legs out at the same time. I was feeling okay. I reached for my phone before I got out of bed. Curiosity plagued me, and I couldn't resist commenting on the video of the spell with a, "Hey, just wanting you to know that I tried this out." How long does it take to work? And she, Regina that is, replied with 7 eyes emojis and nothing else. Weird. I'd figured she'd ask how it was going or what I thought about it. Scrolling through, I couldn't find if anyone else tried it. Some people said they were going to try it this evening. Or they had tried it. 6 days ago. There were some concerning ones, such as, be careful when doing this. This isn't what you think it is. If you try this, girl, give me the tea. And I hope no one is stupid enough to try this. Staring at it, I debated responding and put my phone down again. No one else replied directly to my comment. Strange. There was one other comment of someone who had allegedly conducted the ritual. I clicked on the profile of one of the people who said they had done it. One of 2. They used to post nearly daily, but had stopped about 3 weeks ago. Most of their content had been feel-good, cozy core style, of her happy and looking vibrant. One video caught my eye. Clicking on it, I saw a young woman's face with teary mascara running down it, and only the light of her phone lit up the room. She said, "Guys, I did it. I did Regina Inferni's spell. Something went wrong." She kept looking into the corners and focused on something. "She's here. Look, look. Can you guys see her?" She pointed the camera in the direction of the empty space by the doorway. Wrinkling my nose, I expected a jump scare to terrify me, but nothing came. It was hard to see from how much her hand trembled. There were comments saying there was nothing there, and she was a liar. It was a hoax, or she was doing it for attention. As for the other profile, it had been deleted. I had a nagging feeling I had forgotten something. You know that lingering feeling that wouldn't ease up and would just not fade? Out of the corner of my eye, I thought I saw something. I ignored it. Other than that, I continued on with my regular day with no further interruptions. Other than another absolutely dreadful day at work, that is. Being yelled at, not being given adequate time nor materials to actually do it properly, rude and demanding customers, and the threat of employment termination hanging over my head at all times. Day 3. My sleep was interrupted, disturbed, and I tossed and turned all night. I dreamt of a cloaked figure with a skeletal hand extended out to me. I don't know if they wanted to take me or give something to them. I didn't feel threatened by it, but most definitely unsettled. The creator, Regina Inferni, had made another video about the fame she achieved through her spell work. And since curiosity got the best of me, I DM'd her. "Hey, I did your spell. Weird things are happening. Can you help me?" All she answered was with a, "When?" And I told her, "A couple of days ago. This is the 3rd day." She sent back 3 devil emojis and said, "Have fun." In shock, I commented on her video, telling her she should tell people about the risks. She responded, making a TikTok of it, and she was laying down with her altar in the background, telling her audience they need to research and be responsible for any spell they cast. Which wasn't wrong. She held up my comment as an example, resting it on her palm and giving a sarcastic smile. "If you do something like this, I recommend you get help. Hopefully you'll do it wrong and nothing will happen to you." She looked at the camera, and I swear she was looking directly at me. For a split second, I thought her eyes changed. No glow or altered color. Just different. Someone else was in control of her body. I wonder what she had wanted, what her desires were. I found I was avoiding looking at my reflection. It didn't look like me anymore, and in the few glimpses I took, the expression was different. Calmer, more regal. My skin didn't feel like mine. Walking in a haze into the kitchen to see my roommate slicing into pieces of juicy steak. The sight of the meat sent a shiver through me. The red juice leaking from the meat. If only I could reach out and just... You must finish the rite. I spoke with words and a voice not my own. My roommate gave me a quizzical look. I went to the kettle and turned it on, awkwardly waiting while it heated up, and resting my back on the kitchen cabinet. My roommate was doing her weekly meal prep. The different meats and vegetables hogging space on the kitchen counter. All the meat being sliced. Ignoring it. Pouring the hot water into a mug. Stirring up some instant coffee and pouring in some creamer. The aroma of flesh was intoxicating. When my roommate ducked away to answer a call, I picked up a piece of raw meat, gobbling it up and walked away. Ashamed. Sure, there are parts of the world that ate raw meat, so it had to be okay. The only issue is, I'm a vegan. This isn't normal for me. Grabbing my coffee and retreating back to my room, locking the door, exhaling and resting my back on it, picking up my phone, looking at Regina Inferni's profile, and her latest videos were of her humming to herself, swaying with her eyes closed, and I could see smoke in the background. I wasn't sure what it meant. I stared down at my plate of vegan lasagna, a meal I normally would have loved, and I couldn't keep any food down. I couldn't even look at it without feeling sick. I checked her profile again. She blocked me with no way to contact her. I tried looking for her account on the gram. Blocked there too. I paced in a small area in my room, back and forth on the spot, between the door and my wardrobe, pondering what I should do. Since I couldn't reach out to the creator, and my friends didn't believe me, I didn't know who to turn to. The air felt heavy inside my room. Under the moon's full light, I went out into the backyard again, and the cool air soothed my burning skin. Staring up at the sky, the relief flooded me first, and then a sense of euphoria filled me. Without control of my body, I started dancing under the moonlight, without caring about the angry outbursts from my neighbors, while I started singing in a language unknown to me. I knew the words. I knew her words, and they had become mine. Day 4. My body is sore. I figured from my wild dancing last night. I can't explain it. My skin has broken out into hives, itchy red bumps I couldn't stop scratching, and I noticed more hair in my hairbrush than usual today. I can't stop shivering. I feel drained. Maybe the stress of the situation has given me a 24-hour virus. I told a friend about it, and they said it was all in my head. I can't remember the term they used, that I believed it worked, and seeing all the negative comments took a toll on me. They unhelpfully told me I need to get out and touch grass. Thing is, it did sound like a good idea. Stepping outside into the small shed backyard. Getting outside in the late afternoon, right before dusk. Maybe they're not wrong. Taking it easy, I sat in the community garden, seeing the place in the grass where I'd swirled and danced last night, trying to get close to nature and get a chance to breathe. Some of my neighbors walked past, giving me dirty looks, but no one said anything. I felt my cheeks go red, avoiding their gaze when I felt Something urged me not to. Instead, I looked at them directly, fearlessly, and my eyes felt strange. They hurried to get inside their cars, closing the doors and speeding off wherever they had to go. Sitting on the fence marking the boundary, a crow or a raven, I could never tell the difference, had been looking at me. They weren't common in this area. It never blinked, nor did its attention sway. There was something unsettling about it. It didn't feel like a normal bird. Perhaps this was part of the ritual. I didn't wait to find out. I rushed back inside, sliding the door behind me and staring out the window to see it still looking at me. It watched me through the window, occasionally pecking at the glass to be let inside. Sitting down, I felt my head grow heavy, and suddenly the raven was inside my house, on top of the table. Effortlessly, it walked across the items, flew at my face, and held open my eyelids with its talons, gazing deep into its eyes. Blinking, it replaced its own eye with images of the goddess's blood rituals. A purification of blood and rage. A promise made was not yet fulfilled, and a darkness took me. Day 5. I woke up to see her face gazing down at me, sure of it. She caressed me, her naked body barely concealed by the transparent fabric that only highlighted her curves. It left nothing to the imagination. Her hand lifted my chin to meet her lips, and at the last moment, I turned my head away. She didn't get angry. I slipped into a lack of consciousness. I was sure I wasn't dreaming. What the hell was this? The days faded, and becoming conscious again at midday, I found myself on the bathroom floor, the cold tiles beneath me, staring down at my hands, drenched in blood and swaying on the spot. Gasping, I looked down to see the corpse of who I thought was my roommate, but picking up a piece of bright yellow fabric, holding it in my fingertips and recognizing it. My work uniform. Something dug into my hip, picking up a piece of broken name tag and wiping the gore away with my thumb, only to see Langer and manager. It was her, the boss I hated. I wanted her to go away. Perish? Maybe. I couldn't see any skin, with only raw chunks of flesh, the walls coated red with blood that dribbled down in ribbons with ash, in a strange writing I couldn't read. Staring up at the walls. How? Why? I don't remember any of this. Burnt out black, white, and red candles circled the floor, with the aroma of incense filling the room. Using the bath to pull myself up with a groan, my legs straining and standing shakily on my feet, I blinked, realizing that my eyes were clear now, and I felt healthier than I had for a long time. Unsure what to do, I started cleaning up the bathroom, picking up the candles and picking the wax off the bathtub and threw them in the bin. They were hard and cold, so they had been used some time ago. I thought about the ritual. I pledged my service to her. I knew this, but I remembered my thoughts traveled to the anger I felt at my colleagues, my living situation. I didn't know I was capable of violence. Day 6. The blackouts are becoming more frequent now. I can't predict when they will happen. I know one happened early in the morning at 3 a.m. and later at midday. I'm no longer in control of my body. I lose track of lapses of time, and only becoming alert at the last moment when I realize that I've hurt someone. Usually someone I knew. I'd make it home, clean up, and try to work out what to do. The police would be after me. They have to be. I keep waking up in strange places, usually surrounded by blood, entrails. I'm not sure if they're human or animal. No, it was human. It had to be. Someone who offered some slight toward me that I repressed or thought I moved on from. I wasn't sure which is worse, the knowing or not knowing what was happening. I remembered locking my bedroom door, determined to keep myself inside. I couldn't continue hurting people, and every time I fought it, I was met with an intense headache, feeling daggers prying into my skull, gritting my teeth together, begging for it to stop while I fell on my knees. And I knew I was lying to myself. I enjoyed this. The last time I killed was in a local park, and I just ran home. Naked, and onlookers were screaming, asking me if I was okay. I begged them to stay away, screaming and managing to find the key hidden under the welcome mat, unlocking the door, running inside, and slamming the door behind me. I didn't want to hurt anyone else. Deep down, a part of me wanted to. I loved the sight of fear in their eyes, their pleading, their surprise that I, of all people, would strike them down. I knew something was wrong when more head fog would come. I saw her, pointing her out to my sister during a FaceTime call, asking her if she saw the dark goddess standing there, crowned with pointed regalia, with horns from her skull. This time the figure had flesh, a rich womanly body with an enchanting and equally terrifying face. My sister told me she was going to call someone because there was no one there. But there was. She was there, the dark goddess's hand extended, both in offering and demand. And I knew what I had to do. Her hand in mine, her body soon pressed against me, her hands on either side of my face, and kissed my lips. Tender, gentle, she entered me a final time, and the change was immediate. Day 7. I changed. I'm still me, yet she resides in me. I hear her whisper, no longer scared of confrontation. My skin more smooth, eyes more alluring, and I'm no longer concerned with money or human matters. Now realizing the ritual was nearly complete, I thought the murders would be enough. But no, the final piece of the puzzle needed to be taken. Looking into the mirror, seeing her reflection in place of mine, perfection personified, cloaked with darkness, and wearing a crown of sharp, deadly prongs, flanked on either side by her twisted horns. Each time her appearance altered ever so slightly. Her eyes were gentle, encouraging. I knew I couldn't disappoint her. This would be the final piece of the puzzle. She, my queen, was different for each person. A mother to some, a lover, a cold-blooded killer, a teacher, and for me, an avenger. I could hear my sister calling out to me, pounding her fist on the door, and pleading with me to open it to let her in. Strange. She must have come from interstate to see me. But there was no need. My goddess wanted to help me, for us to become one. My sister's voice faded into the background, with the real world passing away. Instead, I was muffled with the warmth of her, my queen's embrace, a promise I could never deny her. Why would I want to? I reached out to the knife, staring into the mirror, and she inclined her head.
Has to be. Body. It has to be.
Closing my eyes, exhaling to gain my courage, and first slides down from my elbow to my wrist, feeling the knife through sensitive skin, and the spray of blood coating the tiles on the floor, walls, and sink. Swiftly changing hands, I did the same to the other wrist, and with a trembling hand, barely able to hold it steady, I sliced it across my throat. The blood burst and I gargled, staring devotingly into the mirror, grasping the cup, scooping up the blood and saluting her, before swallowing it down while I choked, my chest rattling with the final gasp as my body died.
Your petition is accepted, dear one. Your suffering is no more. We are one.
I'm not initiated, nor do I work with any demons. However, my mother is devoted to her studies in demonology. You could call it an unhealthy obsession. She has never wished to work with these entities, but instead to force them to her will, to become their ruler, to break them, and thus would end up ruling over all humanity. One time, I saw a shadow figure bowing to her while she gloated, making demands of it, and I knew, deep down, that it was toying with her. She was their prey. A flash of hatred in its eyes, and I knew a punishment would be reaped. Needless to say, these entities took a clear dislike to being treated like this. So our lives were plagued with misfortune, lost jobs, things would go missing, angry outbursts, numerous smaller things. But worst of all, pets would go missing only to be found in pieces. Unexplained illnesses, issues with the law. To say she was a negligent parent would be an understatement. She'd tell me just one more ritual and we'd be rich. Or we'd be happy. Or we'd have everything we'd ever dreamt of. We'd be a happy family. How many times did I hear that redundant phrase? Always seeking out the next best thing, rather than consistent work. Perhaps that is why any demons of note shied away from her. She preferred to read books, or communicate in her room devoted to it. One I've never seen inside of. The sacred ritual room. I wouldn't have minded if she behaved like a parent and actually spent time with me, bothering to raise me rather than letting school or TV do it instead. Everything a parent usually did for their child was done by me instead. A silent expectation for me to cover for her when the other adults would try to hold her accountable. I remembered her running out of her room one day, grabbing me by the arms, eyes wide and with a ghastly smile. An unusual unhinged laugh came from her lips. She was babbling and rambling on, telling me that she loved me, and I was the most precious thing in her life. That one of the demons, one she would not name, told me I was fathered by one of their ranks. A gift for many years of service. She speculated on whose I was. Perhaps without foresight, she never bothered to inquire whose exactly I was. With my Kraft mac and cheese, watching TV shows of happy families with parents who actually gave a shit about their kids. The artificial light shining on me, taking mouthful after mouthful until it was all gone, placing the bowl next to all the discarded others by my bedside table, turning off my light, rolling over, and curling up, wrapping the blankets tightly around me. All night I'd hear her chanting, moaning out into the void, crying out to different entities, all in hopes of allowing one to pick her. The desperation would make me sick, resentful. I'd turn the volume up, blasting my ears to drown her out, only for the sounds to grow and grow. Sometimes the walls of our small house would shake. She'd bring a man or two home with her, all in hopes of finding a provider. None of them stayed, or if they did, they'd only remain because of the crazy demon chick and her amorous escapades. Some would catch on that she wasn't the fun kind of crazy, and either they would make their escape, or they'd find themselves taken out, wrapped in thick garbage bags, piece by piece, so to not arouse suspicion from the neighbors. Her bedroom only used for an occasional slumber, and a storage facility for her clothing. We had a pork roast on many occasions. Since it was the only time she bothered to cook, I was happy to accept it. She'd insist that I eat enough and would make sure I'd finish everything on my plate. Never let any go to waste. Given how hungry I was, she didn't need to pressure me too much. It occurred, maybe, every 6 months or so. I first noticed when one of her lovers waved to me, called me kiddo, and tried to ruffle my hair when he walked past. Like the others, I ignored him. And I cringed when I noticed he had the most gaudy tattoo of a woman, with an exceptionally large bosom, with the phrase, "Women love me," underneath. Her standards were already low, yet I got secondhand embarrassment from them both. I'm not sure why that detail, rather than all of his numerous faults, stood out to me. I thought these were proper family events when we had them. Roast pork, potatoes, mac and cheese, and corn. It was great. Sitting together at the kitchen table, I remembered scraping the crackling with my fork, and I noticed the same tattoo, and connecting the dots, paused for a moment before taking another mouthful. Besides their flesh, she'd keep a few choice items from them. Their cash, any valuable items she could sell or trade, and most surprisingly of all, their genitalia. She'd dry the pieces out to preserve them. Using a single nail, she'd secure them to the wall of her ritual room. Knowing her, I wasn't sure if she took them before or after death. At first I'd flinch when I heard that nail driven in by the hammer. I saw them when she partially opened the door, hissing outside to tell me to keep the noise down, and I saw the filth inside. There had to be over 20, lining the walls of varying sizes and shapes. The wicked aroma filled my senses, and I knew I should have hated it, that it was disgusting. Yet the aroma of decay was a homely, even comforting one. Every few months she'd remember I existed. She'd ask me whether I had any new abilities. Always, I'd lie. Who knows what she would have done if she knew the truth about me. I knew I had abilities, ranging in different levels of power. Her love based on these prospective abilities were mercenary at best. I kept it from her. I could travel in my dreams, even moving into other people's ones to influence them. Travel through time, predict the future, find objects that were missing, and see people's intentions too clearly. Do you have any idea how difficult high school was? That said, there were consequences for my mother's union. I'm plagued with nightmares of terrors, war crimes, murder, of faceless people who can never escape. My body never entirely feels like my own. Allergies, illnesses, always plague me, and I'm often finding myself concerned for my safety. Most people can tell there is something wrong with me, even if they can't figure out what it is exactly. I wasn't bullied per se. However, I was excluded from a lot of after-school activities and sat alone at lunchtime. I could have been misdiagnosed with a disorder or some other mental condition if my mother bothered enough to care for my well-being. I woke up to a sound I had prayed for And it was nothing. No chanting nor sounds from the TV. No demonic screaming, orgasmic moans, or demented whispering. Solely an eerie silence. Wincing as I stood, near tripping over the empty bowls and opening the door to her ritual room, I found her, sprawled out on the altar, face down with her black hair spread out. Her back had been broken, with pieces of ribs sticking out. All her joints were twisted, the muscles still taut. I couldn't see her face, with one arm resting on the altar and the other draped by her side, a spilt goblet of wine on the ground, the contents covering the offerings laid down and mingling with her blood. Picking it up and sniffing it to guess the contents, I couldn't quite tell but knew better than to sample it. With a low exhale, I tossed it on the floor and allowed it to drop. Whatever ritual she made clearly failed. I stood staring at her remains, cold, lifeless. It hadn't begun to stink yet. Not that it would have bothered me. We were never close, nor had anyone I could rely on. I was completely alone. Now faced with a dilemma. Do I hide her remains until I was an adult and free of expectations? Or do I risk being put into foster care for my remaining 3 years of my childhood? The latter I did not want. The thought of strangers having any authority over me filled me with dread. And besides, I'd lose the very things that gave me a sense of stability in life, weird as they were. The bills were automatic, and I set them up to pay them, even if occasionally they were paid late. It never sparked notice from the authorities, so I didn't need to worry about those. They knew she was bad with money. I could walk to the store to grab groceries. I could do this. Walking into the room, grabbing garbage bags, stretching them out and placing her body on them. She never had me help with the bodies before. Dealing with the blood and the other fluids were the worst part. Groaning, I pushed her on top, realizing I needed something to secure her. Nearly passing out the front door with my clothing covered in bloodstains. Stopping, I waited in the kitchen and tapping my hands on the surface of the sink. I figured it was time to do our rare mass house cleaning. I knew what the blood and grime from the human bodies were, but there was a thick black tar substance. Staring at the altar, black and brown coated wax covered the surface, and dried droplets dribbled down, hard and old. Old figurines scorched or twisted, their shapes beyond what they once were. I picked one up, a many-breasted goddess, and it shuddered. I imagined loud screaming, muffled and coming from the idol, when I realized the same feeling came from many others, unwilling to release these angry trapped beings out to seek revenge on me. There were remnants of oils, herbs, and pieces of bone, left from hundreds of rituals. I figured most hadn't worked. A book rested at her side, open and with one of the pages singed with ash. Picking it up, the paper was yellow, an older book with a leather-bound cover. I couldn't read the writing. She had scribbled her own notes in a mixture of red and black pen. It decreased the quality of the text, adding her dribble. Tossing the book into the corner, coupled with other discarded ones, and stepping over the bloodstains, avoiding getting my bare feet wet and looking for any clues to find out what happened. I expected a demonic voice of my father coming through, speaking to me for the first time, his voice booming, gravelly and evil, only to have the faint chirping of birds outside. Another day of drudgery. She never bothered to clean, stepping out and walking to the cramped kitchen, covered with bowls, old food wrappers, and stray bills that went unpaid. Opening the cupboard below the sink, taking out a dust-covered bottle of antiseptic and taking it into the room, pouring it on the carpet and beginning to scrub as hard as I could. I felt a presence of something. The ghost of my mother? No, her soul had moved on, or rather, had been taken by one of the many she made a deal with. No, this was something else. Father? I whispered, a note of hope in my voice, only for nothing to respond. Continuing to scrub the floors on my hands and knees, muttering under my breath about how much I hated her. And it was typical of her to leave me to clean up her damn mess. Sweat coated my face. The room was stuffy, with the window boarded up, and all the light kept out with a thick blanket. The chemicals were starting to make my hands sting and my vision blurred. The room swayed around me. I stopped scrubbing, resting the back of my hand on my forehead, and rested back on my heels. I have to pull this shit up, I murmured to myself, dragging the corpse in the bags to the bath, allowing her blood to flow down the drain, and went back into the ritual room. The gargle echoed, and I could have sworn I heard a screaming whisper as it did so, now empty of her remains. I felt a sense of peace inside the room. It felt larger, more open, and I lifted the cloth from the altar to find my grandmother's table underneath. The candle wax cracking, folding over itself. It would be hard to move by myself, yet I had no more options. Collecting all the idols, unsure what to do with them, and place them on the cramped kitchen table. A goat's head with a broken horn, dual symbol of the sun and moon, and a crucifix. Maybe I should have apologized, or taken the time to clean them, offered some apology. Why would she treat them in this way? I dragged it, putting my foot over the carpet. I noticed there were no floorboards underneath, given the fact the property was getting old now. Stomping my foot, realizing it was larger than I thought. Getting a knife, I went into the kitchen, came back, and started slicing into the carpet, pulling it up, ripping it open, and rolling it up to rest on one side, leaving a large well. The moldy smell hit my nostrils, and a sense of home flooded me. It was dark, staring into the abyss. I thought I could get lost staring into it for an eternity when a slow tendril twisted up over the old brickwork, leaving a trail of water, and turning before a great yellow eye stared up at me. It blinked and focused. Was that recognition on its face? With my hands on the edge, staring down at it, and was this my father? A long, sucker-clad tentacle swirled out from down below, and my hand rested on it. It felt like home. Silently it beckoned me. Father? I insisted again. A pair of yellow, cat-like eyes gazed up at me, and another tentacle rose from the deep, a god from long before the human ones rose, and who would be here long after they fell. A deep rumble, and my knees felt weak, trembling before they hung limp, supported by my arms. What do you want from me? I thought for a moment it wished for me to join it down the well in a watery grave. Instead, it yearned to be outside, free in my world. How could an old well be a portal to a realm down below? It was difficult to peer past the unholy terror, to see the contorted shapes of humans and other beings, some sentient and others not, writhing around in a mindless prison, one with no end. The tentacle wrapped around me, wincing and staring into that great eye. I saw everything. The beginning and the end. The rise and fall of millions of nations. The birth of millions of sentient beings, only to watch their destruction. The emotions gripped and pulled until there was nothing left. Only a longing for a time. It squeezed my arm. The thick tentacles wrapped around my arms and held me. Desperate and angry. I don't blame it. Imprisoned by beings from beyond time itself, and now hungry for the world. "Why don't you just climb out?" I whispered. Another long grumble, growing deeper, angrier. It wasn't used to being challenged by lesser life forms. It gripped me, and I clenched my teeth but didn't struggle. It showed me what happened to my mother. It whispered to her during a ritual, naked and on her knees, her hands raised in reverence, inviting whatever great deity to use her body. All her favorites refused the call, not even the chance to punish her, until the true one from down below answered her call, its voice clear. She didn't know who this one was, and the one from down below refused to answer, its name beyond all human understanding. She asked if it would give her all she desired. It remembered the wide grin on her face while she imagined riches, power, lovers, everything her heart possibly yearned for, all mere trinkets in the being's endless ambition. The one told her the price, showing her the world in ruins, the countless dead worldwide, cities destroyed, leaving nothing but ash, rubble, and blood. All but her. She would hold power and all she desired. I noticed specifically I was not present in her deal that she made. Maybe the one was attempting to get a reaction from me. Yet, I was not surprised. Offerings and promises of what I craved out of life. I felt the probing, wriggling and moving through my mind. Surprised not to find doors, nor barriers to keep it locked out. It found nothing. It squeezed so hard I could feel my bones breaking. Instead, I asked it, what if I could give you what you desired? What if I'm the final secret? It was angry now. I could feel it. The suckers pressed into my skin. The large disc bruising and near bursting the different layers. Can you wait for another millennia before another chance emerged? Imagine if that monkey hadn't birthed a child of the seed. I taunted. Words both mine and someone else's. Another's. Confused, my mouth trembled. A smug satisfaction. I knew without the other, I wouldn't have been able to withstand the mental onslaught. Both pulled and twisted my mind in their direction. My brain matter scrambling into nothing but twisted flesh. You'll be trapped down there, in your little well, a captive for all time and beyond.
All I need is the meat.
Those few words were terrifying, beyond human, spoken in a mouth unprepared for human speech. The other voice was pushed away from my mind. Using my body, it pulled its incredible frame up. Large tentacles pressed as the wooden floor creaked, and the stonework of the wall broke away, falling down into the depths of the unknown below. The earth below cracked and faltered, breaking away, and the Great One broke through my house, sending it to rubbles around us. My focus was on it. All I heard were alarms, sirens and screams for help when it rose. All that surrounded me was settling mist and dust from the rubble, a black water with many faces, and half of its great body remained below the earth. I stared up at the one from below, before me, towering over the world. The one from down below stood and awaited my choice. Or rather, I didn't have one. How could I refuse a timeless being from before all? I didn't love. Not that I was incapable. Just not given the chance. I love my mother, my weird little house, and the TV shows I enjoyed and lived my life through. It was small, pointless, but it was mine. The hesitation stung in the back of my throat. A defiance, an unwillingness to comply. Whoever had been my father, a hand rose from the murky water, with 6 fingers, followed by others with strange claws attached to them. Beings before humankind, during and after. The screams, sirens, and alarms faded, until an eerie silence claimed the land. I was alone. I could normally sense other people when they were nearby, or their general presence. I felt nothing. The twin yellow eyes were larger, flared open, and bored deep into my soul. It felt wrong. It waited. The sky was at dusk, drawing all the color out of the world, leaving nothing but a slate-covered blur in its wake. A dream? A flicker of reality peeked through. I saw my body deep in slumber, while the one from below resided where it belonged. Contained, trapped, locked in place, forever inside the prison that kept it down. It was all nothing but a dream. I nearly burst into laughter.
A dream you can never escape. If you wake up, I will be here. There is no escape.
Dreaming had been how I coped with my situation. I'd visit other families, tricking them into believing I was a friendly ghost. Was my mother still alive? Her promises to deity still ringing out in the house while I slept in bed. I tried to wake up, pulling my mind to the light and taking a deep inward breath, seeing my bed and hearing my mother in the shower, the TV still on, and let out a cry of happiness before I was plunged back inside. The one from down below's face close to mine, and I knew I'd be staring into that great eye often. Again, I tried and failed to release myself from its grasp, when I realized that I too was stuck here, with it. If it now lived here in my dreams, and I was forever locked in a dream. "You're stuck here with me," I whispered, closing my eyes. I imagined it slowly being wrapped in large, heavy chains made from the oldest forms of creation. It loosened its grip on me, trying to fight off the bindings, and now with an honesty between us. Open hostility eventually brewed to a stalemate, neither of us able to get the upper hand for long, if at all. I usually wake up with enough time to eat, drink, and rest. The 5th time I noticed my mother kneeling by my bedside, showing more care than she ever had. Or perhaps it was merely self-preservation. Dealing with a dead child would have raised too many questions. She opened her mouth and I talked over her. "I don't have much time." One of them worked. The one from down below answered, and I fight it in my dreams. Keep my body alive at all costs. Even for her this sounded insane. Her mouth like a fish, and her hand moved to rest on my forehead, thinking I had a fever. "I'm serious. Preserve my life. Barter to make me immortal. Do what you need to do." Why was this happening? I heard her thoughts race, and try to find a logical explanation. "Keep it alive." I growled and fell back into my dream world. Inside the fortress I built with my mind, up on top of the highest hill, in the clouds while it rose from down below. Each of us had our own power, control over the beings we created, and the one from down below was constantly attempting to rise, sending its minions to crush mine in an eternal struggle. Eventually, I reached a point where I could hear my mother's whispered words, where she would tell me of the world above, more consideration than she had ever shown me. I felt her hand resting on mine, giving an occasional squeeze of reassurance. The most physical touch she'd ever given me. That one of her spells had worked and we had a new house, a new wealthy boyfriend, the stock market was doing well. She knew the lottery numbers, and managed to get a new car that I saw for a couple of minutes. My new room was beautiful, and my bed state-of-the-art for my comfort. I thought this was her way of making it up to me. It was soured when I discovered she wanted me to aid her by sacrificing someone to the one from down below, or to aid with a spell of hers. She told me of a demon that promised us eternal life, me to protect the world and her to be my caregiver. I hoped to find a permanent solution to the problem. However, no dream nor message from beyond aided me. I'd get flashes of the world in ruins, our atmosphere no more, leaving nothing but a dreary planet void of life. Remnants of buildings, screaming skeletons stretched out into space, no longer contained by the ozone layer, everything kept in place, souls decorating the airspace, unable to move, stuck in a void between heaven and hell, all with hopes of never finding another life. The one from down below's grasp was the only thing keeping me alive. The tentacles and reach extended out, throughout our solar system, aiming even beyond. Without the chains from before, it could do whatever it wished. A fantasy. I kept battling it inside my dream world. A fortress fell around me to rubble, only to be rebuilt once more. Countless armies marched, clashing together, as us, their gods commanding them, onward toward the enemy. We battled in every way possible, by land, by sea, in the air, through time and space. I found something. It tried to keep it from me. A key. The one thing I need to lock the one from down below forever. I just need to win this final battle. Only one more. In the palm of my hand, holding the dual nature of light and dark, all in one, and hurled it toward it. It screeched loudly, the tentacles raised in horrendous submission, and slowly the orb sliced through its great form. A booming cry of defeat rang out as it dispersed into nothingness. The one from down below was simply no more. I had complete power and authority, able to shape the world in my image. The epic battle had finally come to a conclusion. I could rebuild the world anew, however I chose, filled with the ideals and beliefs I desired. I was a hero. I was God. I finally mattered to the world. My existence wasn't pointless.
Humans are so easy to fool.
I never thought of a name for the horse, nor did he give me any. Finally, I settled on the river God. My parents often told me stories about what the river once looked like. Beautiful, lush, from generations before our time. My mother refused to go there after nearly drowning when she was a teenager. It gave her a fear of any body of water. Even taking baths had become difficult for her, while my father would frequently go there as a teenager. A daredevil who would ignore the river's tragic past, and would show me pictures of the strange horses of the river, beautiful and deadly. They were said to drag people out into the depths, leaving nothing but a watery grave. A place where many unsolved crimes happen. While morbid, it is of cultural significance, and they wanted me to go there to see it myself. The first time I was on a walk with my parents, during the winter, my mother avoided the river, preferring abandoned buildings to the water's dangerous edge. In an urban jungle, this river remained the last unbuilt place, though many had tried and failed. It never snowed where I live, only a thick haze, cold, grey, and lifeless. Only wild storms that upheaved the terrain, with fallen tree logs and shrubs scattered around. Wildflowers grew with mold and fungi, covering every piece of stone or concrete. No signs of human settlement ever survived here, before nature would find a way to break it. I stepped over the remains of an old park seat, careful to avoid the large wooden splinters. The foundations of homes close by the river were in varying stages of ruin. Signs of old thatch homes and stone circles from the earliest buildings, stone farmhouses and cottages from the 18th century, remnants of fibro, asbestos-ridden places from the 1950s, and finally, a modern square building that had been semi-swallowed by the river. It sat dormant, now the home for wildlife and mold. Mosquitoes circled, laying their eggs in idle patches of water. None of the owners decided to stick it out. A thick fog clung to the air, casting a grey hue over the water and foliage. I saw the outline of my dad, his camera raised taking photos, and walked over to see how he was doing. There had been rumors of wild horses, feral ones who had escaped their containment, and now roamed through the riverbank. No matter how many times they tried to catch them, they always managed to evade capture. They disappear into the mists, leaving nothing but trails of shadow in their wake. A silhouette of a horse head pierced out of the water. It turned to face me, and in the blink of an eye it was absorbed by the mist. I wandered to the water, wanting to be part of it, reaching out with my hands, only for my mother to grab me, scream for my father, and we went back home. I wasn't allowed to return. However, children often didn't obey their parents. I aimed to poke the shoulder beside me, calling my cousin over, only to find he had run off with his friends. Spending time at the old river was part of my early teenage years, with no other forms of entertainment in the local township. My teeth chattered, keeping my arms close to my chest and rubbing my hands together to keep the warmth in. Sitting on a fallen log that served as a bench, watching and waiting, I remembered hearing stories of ghosts, horses and people who would whisper, calling for any to enter the water. At dusk, I remembered watching in awe at the sight of that elongated head, peeking out of the water before it rose to its feet. Yet it never left the water, always standing on the edge. The tide was out, and visibility had improved considerably. The fog withdrew. I saw it clearly for the first time. The yellow, bloodshot eye keeping sight of me, unblinking, and I felt I was in the presence of a being not of this world. The intensity struck me. An eyelid moved over it, closer to a lizard than a horse. I knew not to get too close to the shoreline. I stopped a meter away, my feet sinking a little into the sand, and the sound of water trickling. Its long, thick mane had seaweed, and small pieces of bone intertwined in it. I was unsure whether the bone fragments were human or animal. The fur resembled dried stone, was coarse in some areas, and bald in others, with large cracks and ribs that protruded from its flanks. It didn't chew or move its head like any living horse I had previously encountered, instead staying perfectly still. It had all the shape of a horse, yet the proportions felt unnatural. One part too large one moment, then another. I blinked, wondering whether anyone else saw him. My cousins further down the pathway looked past him, through him, laughing while they scooped up their random finds with their hands, and disappeared into the mist. I could hear them laughing, oblivious to the fact we weren't alone. I debated calling out to them and running to catch up with them. For a time, it felt like we were by ourselves, staring up at the being, both a source of light and darkness. A fascination now awoken. "Who are you?" I whispered. My question hung in the air, where my nose wrinkled at the foul aroma of the water, polluted, and still with a chance to fester. My hand rose, covering my mouth, and stepped back. It didn't address me. Slowly it turned its head, muzzled toward the deeper depths. And suddenly, I started imagining how comforting, how warm the water would be. I imagined walking inside, the water slowly moving up my body until it reached my neck, and the floating feeling of safety lured me. It was warm rather than cold, and the feeling of security filled me, relaxing me. Why did I want to be here forever? I closed my eyes and remembered the river was polluted and dirty. It was dangerous. I jerked, opened my eyes, and saw the water now reach my knees. Looking around, feeling the reeds and other plant life around me, holding me snugly in place. And I knew I wasn't alone. The horse's muzzle parted, revealing a dribble of congealed blood. Lips drawn back and the teeth were sharp. Backstepping suddenly, the sludge gripped and pulled on my boots, eventually causing me to fall back and using my arms, feeling the grime between my fingers, and staring up at the unblinking horse, standing over me with a neutral expression. My cousin teased me about falling, and the muddy stain on the back of my pants. They offered me a hand and pulled me out of the mud. I murmured something about a horse in the river, and when I looked over to where it had been, I saw it was gone, sitting on a folded picnic rug and a piece of tarp to protect the back seat of my uncle's old, shabby car. The bumpy road through the mountains, made of wild, twisting lines of asphalt, caused me to gaze out the window, expecting a horse's face to stare back at me. There was routinely nothing in the reflection other than my blank face staring back. Azure mountains and blue-green forest passed by the window, blinking slowly. I knew it would be some time until we were back in civilization. The afternoon drifted to dusk, and with heavy eyelids, I drifted off to sleep. I kept seeing shadows from the corners, glowing red eyes, and whispers of a tongue long forgotten. It was getting closer, kin to the river god, perhaps. I woke up to my uncle shaking me by the shoulder, telling me to wake up, sleepyhead, and he would see me next week. Sleepily, I barely remember saying my goodbyes and stumbling into the house. After being dropped off at home, I went straight up to shower and told my parents I grabbed something to eat in the morning. I flopped face first on the bed, arms dangling over the edge, and my dreams went back to that same river. I walked on the shoreline. It was a clear day, not a cloud in the sky. A moon and sun both danced above me. It was peaceful. A shadow lurked through the water. Ripples extended outward until they reached the shoreline. Staring out, I waited for the spectre to approach, only for it to drift downstream. Around me, people were walking with their families, playing games and having barbecue. I remember a voice, soft and serene, telling me that one time the river was a perfect blend of human involvement and the natural world, combining both in perfect symmetry. A solitary scream came, loud and shrill. A body was found, and soon a horde of humans surrounding it, pointing it and growing fearful. I wondered why no one bothered to call the police. I couldn't see who it was. Peeking through them, I saw the remains of a teenage girl, laying in the reeds and her hand reaching out, just on the edge of the shoreline, limp and lifeless, with clammy skin in her Sunday dress, ripped and pulled up to her waist, and her black hair clung to her face. A man pulled it back to reveal faint blood from her open lips. I noticed all of her teeth were missing, and leaving empty gums in the process. A woman pulled down her skirt to protect her modesty. Her boyfriend was on his knees, sobbing when he saw her body being brought out, covered in a tarp, weeping how he swore he saw something grab her from under the water, while people were distracted with her corpse. A circle formed around it to keep onlookers from tampering with the body. Whispers of the river's legends were told. It had been over 50 years since the last corpse had been found. Parents took their children away from the scene, leading them by the hand while they pulled, wanting to see it for themselves. Several police cars, and one for the only funeral home in town, came to retrieve the body. They set up a perimeter. The boy disappeared, only to be found later that night, face down in the reeds, a strange bloody mark at his neck, and whispers of her family taking revenge circled the town. Onlookers left the crime scene after the police told them to leave. While smoking a cigarette, a weathered detective stood on the shoreline, staring out into the river. His focus wasn't on the body, but on the horizon. A local who had heard all the legends and saw him walking through the mist before he disappeared. The detective watched with a long, intense draw of the cigarette, and later he'd be hitting the bottle hard. The other officers tended to the corpse retrieval, a silent knowing of the cause of what occurred. Both cases to this day remain unsolved, with none wishing to speak about it. One of many that remained in old, dusty boxes, with no answers accepted by science. Other than knowing whispers among locals, it was silenced. I saw their ghosts lingering on the shore, their hands pleading with me in silent yearning for me to join them. Some were rotten, some closer to skeletons, while others were fresh, plump. Some had pale, bloated bodies where their skin had absorbed great amounts of water. For this generation, the river was forever changed, the folklore made flesh. They were one of many people who had been found in the river, always a man and a woman. It didn't matter the age. There was nothing sharp nor sudden that pulled me from my dream. Stretching and arching my back, with my arms out the sides, my house was dark still. The morning dawn no longer brought light through the windows. My hometown close enough to be impacted by the spread of the fog. Getting out of bed, opening my bedroom door, and felt water at my feet. I swore, called down the hallway for my parents, telling them that a pipe must have burst. Walking on my tippy toes through the water, leaving smaller splashes as I moved, and without an obvious source, I went to the most likely of places. "Hey! The house is flooding!" I called out loudly, hoping to wake them, but didn't want the damage to get worse than it already did. I noticed it came from the bathroom, and once I opened the door, it slamming behind me, and noticed the faucets of the sink were running, water spilling over the edge. I turned both faucets of the sink, turning them off, and then realized something clogged it. The shower was also running full pressure, with steam rising from the tiles and creating a foggy atmosphere inside. Damn it! The condensation was hot, and turning both sets of faucets off, and burning my hands in the process. It too was blocked at the drain. Reaching in, pulling out thick, sloppy mud and tree roots. "What the hell?" I questioned, holding it up and examining it between my fingers, wrinkling my nose in pure disgust, wiping it on a pristine hand towel, leaving a dark stain marking the white. I could still hear water coming from other rooms, swearing and calling out again to my parents to help me, running down the hallway to the kitchen sink, my feet splashing on the tiles, and I turned the faucets off. The water had spilled over the top. It was murky, brown, and smelled like the river, and reaching down to find the drain was blocked by the same substance as the bathroom. The kitchen window had a dab mist, and it wasn't normal. Looking in the pooling water, a flash of a figure and a muzzle rose, grabbing my wrists and pulling me. I pulled back, feeling the teeth sink into my flesh, and reaching for a dirty knife, waiting to be cleaned. Stabbing it repeatedly in a blind panic. Unsure how, I was pulled down up to my shoulder, yanking back and forth, feeling like my arm was on the verge of being pulled from its socket. Screaming for help that never came inside the empty house. I managed to yank my arm out, falling backward, and breathed heavily, feeling my wrist for any sign of damage. Other than being filthy, it was intact. Breathing heavily, resting a hand on the kitchen counter and heaving, my heart racing. Leaning over, I stared down inside to see that cold, golden eye of the river god locked on me, and I knew I was its prey. A low rumble. It tried speaking to me, and I closed my eyes, trying to block it out. I had to be dreaming. There was no way it could reach out to me like this. The eye blinked, only to see my parents staring up at me, silently screaming, gurgling on water, drowning before they slid down the pipe. "What the hell?" I whispered, opening the cupboards beneath, and seeing nothing but a choking mess of roots, vines, and plant matter. I couldn't reach it even if I tried. Looking out the window, seeing my neighbors' houses as mere shadows surrounded by that mist. It was raining, soft, gentle, and constant. I heard slow moving hoofbeats approaching me. Turning around, I saw nothing, and instinctively moved to put my back to the sink, picking up the kitchen knife again, holding it above, ready to strike if I was attacked. The sound stopped. Now only the idle trickle of water. This time it came from the walls, casting an almost serene look to the establishment. Gently water flowed down the tiles, creating small streams, with smaller, identical worlds springing to life, with their own life forms and vegetation, compared to the stark place it had been. Spellbound and staring at it, I knew it was a waking dream, one escape from seemingly impossible. Perhaps if I ran to my bedroom, I'd see myself still sleeping. Quickly I ran, and the plaster cracked down the walls, opening my bedroom door, and seeing my sleeping form with a black mare, a nightmare standing over it. I screamed, trying to wake up, and all my sleeping form did was lay dormant, eyes frozen open. With an unnatural coldness in the air, the mare's red eye, seemingly removed from her head, turned to face me. Fleeing back to the kitchen, beneath my feet the tiles cracked, roots and plant life pierced through, twisting and turning away the human world, since theirs had been invaded. Why not do the same to us? The rummaging grew louder, more oppressive, and suddenly, in a well I was pulled through the drain pipe. This had to be the real nightmare. Choking, moving through water, and finally flailing my arms until I met with dirt. Water filled my lungs and gasping for air, coughing as I went, hauling my torso out of the water and coughing up the grime from the river. After I was done heaving, depleted and helpless, laying on my stomach with my head to one side, feeling something standing over me, rolling on my back to see that dread horse gazing down at me, who's concealed by the water, with seaweed and twisting vines running up its legs, blurring the line between its body and the river itself. Its body was stone, cracked and roots piercing up through the gaps, while barnacles lived on its flanks. A long tail descended into the water. No, it was part of the watery mass. It regarded me with that eye of his, yellow, closer to a feline than a horse. Was he some forgotten god who still lingered on the fringes while others were held in reverence? A low rumble emitted from its mouth, beyond mine or any human's understanding. Timeless, a god made flesh. I looked at my hand. It had large bite marks and a finger that had been yanked off close to the knuckle. My pajama arm was torn, ripped at the sides. I curled my fingers, looking up at the sky, cast between dawn, dusk, and the timeless endless of night. I crawled out of the water and made my way up the shore, only to realize my quest for safety was a false one, holding up my arm to stop it from attacking me. Just in case. Please. What do you want with me? I pleaded, looking up at the overgrown shrubs and well banks. Silence followed an echo of a woman's voice, spoken in a language I couldn't understand. Reaching out, my hand felt something hard, and I lifted up a skeletal arm, picked clean of flesh, the rotted clothing still clinging to the bones. Holding it in aghast horror before throwing it and scrambling, digging into the earth to pull my body up in fearful determination, hearing a crunch when my finger loosened, and figured losing part of my finger was better than dying. Bones of countless dead moved through my fingers, most rotted down to the barest fragments, and loose shards breaking down to join the rest of the sand. Their whispers circled, luring me in for a chance to temporarily ease their suffering. A rare moment of reprieve, slow and steady. My struggles were no use, and I found my bare feet, first feeling the cool caress of the water, kicking out, screaming, and that rumble came again. Feeling the intensity, I knew he was the source. This time I saw several times from the past, buildings erected in haste, a time of fertility and bliss with nothing but security. Countless generations walked through, and their distinctive clothing, customs, even languages that differed over time. Families moving close to the bounty the river provided. Food, water, scenery, and a place to call home. The dream traveled back further in time, when their ancestors' ancestors first came to the river. Low chanting filled the skies, an eternal gratitude to the spirits who roam the land. Wine and beer poured into the water, boiling metal dropped inside, the most precious of their gifts and thanks, but the most important yet to come. The pair, a royal youth, the king's beloved heir, and a virgin girl, blessed with foresight, came forward. Both were divinely touched with health and good looks, with comely faces, naked and painted in the hue of blue plants, with long forgotten symbols, holding each other's hands. They walked into the river up to their waists, eyes closed in bliss, knowing their sacrifice would forever connect their people to the land. First the woman for creation. A priest took her, plunging her head under the water, and soon instinct took over. She scratched and kicked out at him, who held her until she passed. Her body flowed freely in the water. The prince received differing treatment. A dagger plunged into his neck. His blood squirted out and mixed with the water. The priest's words chanting, an offer to the river god who took form. Their bodies pushed into the middle of the river, an offering given. A grey stallion. The river god came from the depths. Only this time, he appeared healthy and filled with vigor. His mane was a watery trail flowing down his neck, while his tail equally born of water. The coat unblemished with living vines flowing up his legs. He was in his prime here, worshipped, feared, adored, a guardian and protector of the river. The dead sank beneath the surface. The soul signed the offering had been accepted. Their bodies claimed. The priest, recognizing the personification, bowed his head in reverence and pierced his own skin, twisting and pulling into circular patterns to demonstrate an acceptance of a promise given. I saw countless number of their kind approach. Generation after generation would come and make their offerings in good and blood. Their tribute, the sacrifice would become his speakers, their parts becoming one with the river god, and a mere whisper of themselves. For a time, things worked. Her words, soft and delicate, her accent foreign to my ears, and I realized I was speaking to the god. I looked behind me for the source to find. Nothing. Whoever he was seemed appeased by their offerings, and the land was lush, fertile. The memory faded, and soon I was back on that foul-smelling riverbank, the maw of the great beast centimeters from my head. I don't want to be a sacrifice, remembering the countless willing who had gone to him. Another memory. A people of conquerors dressed in wolfskin and leather armor came to drive the priests away. They cut down any who opposed them, leaving entire streams of blood pouring into the river. All the wooden idols and traditions, replacing the river spirit with their own gods, before another force drove those gods away with a singular, all-powerful one. Their tattooed bodies no longer, their language barely spoken, and soon barely an echo remained. The river god, now starved, would lure young maidens and youths to the shoreline, dragging them down beneath the water to claim their souls into his keeping, seeking answers that never came. The locals became wary of the power of the water, saying the river was cursed. An old crone, a survivor, whispered that he was angry, and that we'd never find peace here. Any wild horses running spread rumors of the river god, a case of mistaken identity. People would abandon horses here, especially pregnant mares for him to claim. Foals were never seen. Soon none desired to be offered to him, and their offerings non-existent. They'd still take from the river, feasting on its bounty and casting their waste inside. Old furniture, food wrappings, construction materials, and used items of an intimate nature, no longer needed. I could feel its anger at the neglect, the disrespect, and the lack of reverence. A price had to be paid. Gone were the fire of youth, and now a change had corrupted him, turning him into the dread beast he was now. It had morphed into something twisted, polluting the water, allowing it to die, and thus a punishment needed to occur. The sacrifices of the unwilling had increased, although they never came into the water unwilling or unaware, screaming and pleading for their lives as I had done. All the homes nearby had become his, haunting their dreams, sending his unholy daughters nightmares, black mares of dread who spawned night terrors, twisting and turning souls until they were inside out, madness kissing their minds, driven to drowning themselves in pools outside, or in their bathtubs, condemning themselves to their watery fates. Those who survive would flee the scene, leaving behind their tainted possessions to be claimed by the flooding river. Yet those sacrifices weren't enough for the insults. Any guests who had come would be haunted. Confused, my hand cautiously reached up to his muzzle, recanted and withdrew it. The haunted calls of the dead surrounded me, the shadows of figures with their remains gone from the earth. The sand, silently commanded by him, held my arms in place, molding perfectly to my limbs and becoming solid. The water crept up around me, my nose, mouth, and chin above the surface. I could barely breathe, my sight obscured by the murky water, causing the shapes to blur and twist into horrid patterns, merging reality with the unseen world. My body lingered between the living and dead. I wanted to live. I saw the first two, solely garbed in their tattoos, gazing through the water at me, crowned with a circle of seaweed, and with white demonic eyes, still holding hands, and unlike the others they were unblemished. The others of their people stood as shadows, silent voices who whispered compared to those unwilling, who wailed in terrifying laments of their passing. Perhaps if one had been willing? Truth was, even with the choice in front of me, knowing my fate if I didn't comply, I want to die. For you. The sand gripped me tighter, and the muzzle descended. Lips pulled back to reveal surprisingly horse-like inner teeth, plunging into my chest and biting through the skin. I wanted to scream, yet nothing escaped my lips. He wants me to suffer as much as possible, I thought to myself. The low rumble responded to me. A greater pain suffered, the better the reward. I saw another memory, perhaps a vision of the future. One where the river was restored, back in balance with people, and those free to leave if they wish. No threat of dying by the water's edge. No sending out the nightmares to trespassers. And homes no longer being flooded. Balance. No pollution nor garbage discarded by the waterways. Paradise. He stopped, a green crab wriggling down his forelock, before regarding me with that steady yellow eye. I realized the river god too had been in pain. A long, silent agony that never ceased. An Ouroboros of continuous suffering. The more it would hurt, the greater the healing. I opened my mind. Thoughts, feelings, and my connections to my old life no longer mattered. My eyes closing in eternal surrender. Once, twice, until its mouth entered me with foul teeth around my heart, lifting its head and tearing veins whilst blood spurt. He popped it, sending crimson over the sand, the only colour left in a dreary world of grey. One bite followed another, ripping, pulling, and his daughters pulling the horrific memories from my mind, granting me a moment of reprieve. Gazing up at the sky, feeling my skin pulled away, pain no longer mattered to me, and I thought I saw the clouds part, with a hint of sun peering through, passing. I knew I was dying. My heart still beat in his muzzle, locked between his teeth, still bursting traces of blood, without knowing it was no longer needed. And patiently, I waited. The river god's teeth clamped down, causing it to burst, and my body fell limp. I heard the scurrying of 1,000 small crabs, entering my eye sockets and pinching, pulling their way through. My sacrifice resulted the return of a pact. My human body no more, doing his bidding. I was broken and twisted beyond repair, extending out to match his body. Human skin draped over an equine form. My features elongated and turned into a horse head. My hair created a patchy mane that grew long over time. When I approached humans, they ran and whispered, too frightened to continue their illegal dumping of goods. The river god, now with a truce of flesh, he transmuted full time into stone, taking the form of a statue, and only appearing when it was time to accept a sacrifice. Blood would fill the cracks and he would be reborn, free to hunt in the mist before the skies would clear and humans would return unharmed. And that is why you and your partner are here. At dusk, the sun descended, and I knew it would be the last sunset I'd ever see. Through the cold metal bars, I saw the faces of those who had come to watch me die. Some were excited by the thought, practically gloating in victory. Others curious, and some with a sadistic gleam in their eyes. All their prayers for my demise had finally come true. The Scarlet Woman would now be out of their way. And some solely enjoyed the sport of seeing members of the nobility being taken out. One of the rare times they could have their revenge. Already wishing for my body to be broken horribly. How many would rush to grasp my remains to take home as trophies? Or for spells? For grim mementos of my final moments of suffering? A sorcerer would pay a pretty price for my body parts. Whispers of what I was fill the court. A sorceress, a harlot, a shapeshifter. They weren't wrong in their accusations. A woman cursed me and spat close to the bars, while others glared at me while they walked past. Growing whispers of hostility, a way none would have dared speak to me in the past. I doubted the guards would bother to hold them back. How many prisoners would share my fate tomorrow? How many innocents? My hand, scarred and bleeding, gripped the cold bar in place of the soft, delicate one I once had during better times, yanking it back when my skin sizzled. The bars had been specially installed for me, lined with silver to prevent my escape. Cradling them on my lap, I could see the outline of my bones, and any movement caused sharp pain to shoot through my hands. The wounds would heal, reopen, and heal again, only for the cycle to repeat. The process was incredibly draining. Broken, each finger had been pulled out, damaging the joints. My hair, previously waist length, clung to my skull in sparse clumps. Bloody sores coated my head, and I could feel my face had been misshapen. My right eye swollen. It was difficult to see out of it, and I was too frightened to look. I was drained from the silver, and my injuries couldn't heal properly. Looking away, refusing to permit my last memories to be of them. I didn't want my last memories to be riddled by thoughts of their cruelty. I tried not to think about them, and ached to feel the wind on my skin one last time. A simple freedom I've been denied for months. I remembered being arrested while walking in the palace gardens. It was a warm day and the flowers were in bloom, a shock to those around me. I thought it was a ploy to draw out the king's enemies, and soon I would be released. Lifting my weary arms, the metal chains made a clinking sound as I pulled on them, only to smack back down once more. I had no strength left, both around wrists and ankles, lined with silver. Starvation, sleepless nights, and a haunting daytime had taken their toll on my body and soul. Perhaps death would have been a blessing after all I have endured. I wondered how many of my new friends would attempt to speak for me, to protect me, or who would try to aid me in escaping. Thus far, none had come through. Resting my back on the grimy stone wall, I gazed up at the night sky and longed to be outside. Through Luna's gift, a temporary reprieve would be found, free from the burden of humanity. Not yet a full moon, imagining the cool night air on my body, caressing my limbs and running free, unburdened by all troubles. Memories of running through the nearby forest, under the splendor of the moon, feeling Luna sway, moving in both my forms, human and Lycan. Euphoria running through my body, freedom from my situation, any situation. I'd draw my lover close. Our bodies would entwine, and for a time, we would know bliss together, a sacred truth of who we are. I'd lay unburdened by clothing under the moonglow, absorbing her power, and our bodies would become one, free from the obligations of our mortal lives. Luna, powerful as she was, could not shield me from the brutal reality of where I am. Whimpers, screams, and cries of innocence echoed throughout the prison, forcefully bringing me back to reality. Looking over, I saw a scullion with her hand down a guard's pants, no doubt attempting to earn an early release. His coarse moaning made my final hours even more tedious. At least they left me alone, fearing I would curse them. Even now it was difficult to drown them out. The horrors had become my new normal. My body tensed when I heard footsteps behind me, and I prayed the guards would take a final visit. It would mean my death. I'd die before they touch me, but not before I tear their throat out. They got closer. The jagged remains of my fingernails dug into my skin, and I closed my eyes tight. The keys jingled. The door opened, and they said nothing to me. A wooden tray was placed on the floor of the cell. A fresh bread roll and folded envelope with a goblet of the finest wine. I stared at it skeptically. At first, any visitation to my cell was respectful, until they discovered that I had fallen out of royal favor. Why did they suddenly return to better etiquette? How I recognized the aroma and longed for the expensive items of my station. I pulled the tray toward me, rested my hands on it, and still my gestures were slow. I lifted the goblet, staring into the liquid, and seeing my brutalized reflection. My beauty was gone. I smelled the fragrance. It masked a thinly veiled poison. Hemlock? And a hint of valerian, I believe. Yet there was an undernote. Something else. Arsenic? Yet there was another thing that lingered. An aroma I have never smelled before. Probably another poison. A small note was hidden underneath. Deciding to save that for later, I opened the envelope. The wax seal and lack of mark on the paper suggested it was from the king. Cold and official. Staring at the letter, it wasn't even written by his hand, but by one of his scribes. Different from the man I knew, or thought I knew. I would receive no pardon. The execution would go as planned. I opened the smaller, hidden note. The writing was more sporadic, and it was a relief to finally read his. I couldn't help but smile when I recognized it. Memories flooded back of all the love letters I received, bathed in rose water, and kept as personal keepsakes, hidden inside a box, concealed inside a wall. This letter so unlike the others. It said that he loved me, and he was being blackmailed. The more I read, the more I realized his answers were excuses. Pure cowardice. The Dukes, an alliance forged by the Duke of Arundel, had discovered his secret. A malediction from a long-lost ancestor, and were hoping to expose him. Cursed by the devil, and thus unfit to rule. They set a trap for him, and gave him a choice. Get rid of me, or lose his crown. I remembered cautioning him about their advice. Our bodies pressed together in the hallway of his castle, his back on a tapestry of a victory of his great-grandfather. My hands cupped his cheeks, feeling his beard under my fingertips, urging him that once this occurs, they will demand more. It would risk him, his children, and his legacy. The secret, the same one that had brought us together. Flipping over to the other side, eyes straining in the dim light, the memory faded, as did my fond smile. My eyes scanned the words, feeling my heart sink. He told me he couldn't bear to watch me die. The wine was poisoned. I would drift off to sleep and wouldn't wake up. I'd feel no pain before I passed. One last mercy. He believed the same secret that would condemn him would also fade away. He was protecting his children and prayed I would understand. I wasn't going to ask to see him formally, nor attempt to escape. If he wished for me to die, then it would be so. My hand squeezed the note, crumbling it in my hand, only to discard it on the floor, and ignored both bread and wine. Let someone find it to use against him. He couldn't even tell me himself, nor come see me one last time before the end. My back pressed on the cold wall of the cell, my arms wrapped around my torso to keep the warmth in. Despite my cracked lips, I no longer felt thirst nor hunger. A pair of rats fought over the bread while I idly watched. I would greet him the next day, alert and unfazed. I didn't sleep that night, my memories of my rise still fresh. I had been adored, cherished, and prized before catching the eye of the king. We danced, drank, and had merry times, while the queen looked on in understandable frustration that brewed to hatred. Their political union had brought no happiness to either of them. An alliance of nations, not of love. I was too caught under his spell, his smile, and I willingly spied on his enemies, gathering information to secure his throne. And finally, he realized how this was making him appear to others. I was ensnared in a political plot, thrown in prison, a relatively pleasant one, with the promise of rescue, only to receive none. Months passed, until time no longer mattered, and I was transferred to this cell, where I rot away. My threats to the guards no longer having any weight, they had only resulted in laughter at my expense. No tears would be shed for the king's discarded harlot. None of my family came to see me, nor any friends or supporters who had risen with me along the way. I was left alone with my thoughts. I must have drifted off when I realized the sun was creeping over the horizon, peering in through the window, and I groggily gazed up. Most people were still in bed, and it gave me time to wonder. I stared down at the wine and bread. Despite being gnawed on by the rats, it was still edible, and an option. Slowly the town was coming to life. My final day was just an ordinary one for the townspeople. A crowd of vendors sold their wares, while the scaffold was being set up. I wouldn't be the only one killed today, nor would I be the first. Instead, I was the last to die. I watched as filthy, chained wretches were let out, heads down and resigned to their fates, while some cried, their sobbing family members clinging to them, only to be pushed back by the guards. One, a young man, pushed the guard away, attempted to feebly fight, while the others were resigned to their fate. It was pointless. He made it only a few meters, then was brought back to the scaffold. 3 thieves were hung from the neck, one gasping and slowly choked, while the other 2 blessedly had their necks snapped. The crowd cheered happily, and soon more prisoners were brought out, and I recognized them. With their clothing, stained and damaged as it was, I could tell their fall from grace had been brutal. Traitors to the crown, the Duke of Arundel and others who sought to condemn him. It was bittersweet knowing that they would perish, the same ones I had helped bring to justice, only instead They met their fates with the axe. Beheaded. The first lost his head quickly, while the others were slower, more brutal. The axe was blunt, and the headsman was becoming tired. I thought they'd cry out to the king for mercy, and to confess their wrongdoing, all in hopes of preserving the lives of their family members. Instead, only coarse and garbled voices rang out, when I realized their tongues had been cut out. Land, wealth, and titles were already gone, in the hands of another, no doubt. A new favorite now rewarded. I smiled bitterly to myself, knowing that I was at least successful. This time it was bloody. They were drawn and quartered, their intestines pulled from living flesh, and while they nobly tried not to scream, the screams came. A waterfall of horrific wails as their skin was broken and watched while they were castrated. The executioners holding it up to the crowd, who let out a roar of insults. Their limbs were cut off and placed in carts nearby, no doubt to be taken all over the kingdom. And I wondered whether my head would be displayed from some bridge or fortress. "It is time," was all a guard said, and waited for me to stand. He didn't rush or try to hurt me. I said nothing. My hands trembled and I regretted not drinking the poison. Dying was one thing, but to the jeers of a crowd was another. Once I stepped out, I heard taunts condemning me, even by those who had previously desired my favor, and others that blurred into one. I kept my gaze focused on the scaffold, a dreaded place that had become my refuge. Something struck my shoulder, nearly knocking me back, and then another. The guards cleared a pathway and struck the more pushy of their ranks back, threatening them with their swords. I knew the king would be here, either openly or in secret, and I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing me weep for him. I saw others in the crowd who had been my rivals, people I didn't offer support to, or simply wanted to see me die. I had no one left to worry about. "Do you have any last words?" the grim voice asked me, and the crowd silenced themselves. Peasants standing close to the platform, already coated in blood and final movements of the previous victims, while the nobility stood behind them on a stand, away from the stench of the lower classes, silently, with only an idle cough ringing out with them, granting me silence. I was surprised I was given the chance to speak at all. "Your king, our king." My throat was dry, cracked, and it was difficult to speak. Still, I pushed on. My eyes betrayed me and instantly sought him, wishing he would save me as I had rescued him. I saw him staring up at me in the crowd. He stood among the peasants, in disguise, unwilling to let his mourning be public or face the nobility. Warm eyes stared up at me, a tear in them, while his face remained stern, only for his top lip to lift when a kiss was placed on his cheek. His latest spy standing at his side, a wicked smile on her lips, and a feeling of rising anger at the betrayal took hold. "He's in control of me." I pointed my finger at him. "He is the devil. The king bears the mark of the beast. The men who died earlier were innocent men, put to death for a tyrant." I loved how some stepped away from him, and he backed away in surprise at my gesture. A stranger pulled back his cowl to reveal his face, and the guards, now alarmed, started to move toward him, to surround him in a protective perimeter. "There! He stands among you. He is a beast that turns at night, a curse pledged with a devil, and here he condemns me. If it was to be my end, it would also be his." I saw the king's eyes turn yellow, shaped like a beast's, and I knew the change was coming. a cold anger in them. A low growl lingered in his throat. The spy at his arm noticed, releasing it and stepping back with her eyes wide in fear, realizing my accusations and the whispers were true. Unlike me, he couldn't control the change. The moon and intense emotions rose. It took him seconds before his form ripped through his clothing. Slate-colored fur peeked through flesh. His shoulders and arms grew larger, and a wolf-like head with savage, fierce fangs were bared. Unable to control himself, or without my soothing whisper in his ear, the Lycan madness claimed him. His jaws clamped down on the spy's neck, sending a spurt of blood into the air and tearing the skin, dropping her, leaving her clinging to life under the terrified crowd. There was a symphony of gasps, screams, and overall sounds of frightened people. It was difficult to focus on any particular thing. I knew I could have used this time to escape, conceal myself, and flee out into the forest. They'd never catch me there. The captain, his friend, one of the few who knew his secret, moved forward unarmed to attempt to restrain the king, before he too found his flesh meet with fang. The king bit down on the metal plate, crushing the captain's shoulder and causing his left canine to crack and break off on the armor, and shaking his head. The captain's fear-riddled face, still unwilling to hurt his friend, and tried to hold him back. He called for someone to assist him, pleading with his majesty to stop, only before a bloody gurgle escaped his lips, when his throat was slashed by wicked claws. I gazed in awe. My lover had been quite the hunter. The guards, with their shields and swords ready, stood in front to protect the populace, and without a chain of command, it descended into panic, each fleeing to find their family in order to protect them from the danger. The crowd, overwhelmed with the sight before them, started fleeing in all directions, and making it harder for the guards to do their jobs. Briefly, I knew his children and even his wife would now be in danger, blighted by the association with their father. I hoped those innocents would escape in time. Some were knocked down onto the ground, bruised and battered while they tried to stand, only to be shoved down again. I'm not sure how many perished, or would later die from their injuries. The king leapt onto the scaffold, knocking 3 of the guards to the ground in the process, and snarled at me. The executioner raised his axe, only to be thrown back. The silver-plated shackles at my wrists and ankles stopped the change, my skin burning intensely, only causing my body to weaken. It longed to join him, to hunt and be free of our humanity. No words were spoken, the love he had for me now gone. I was a threat, and thus I had to die. I stood waiting for his revenge, eyes closed in content. I could feel the heat from his breath, and knew he was close. "You're finished. I warned you. If I fell, you would too," I whispered through clenched teeth at him. The betrayal had been too much. My moment of victory was short-lived. I was knocked down, and his teeth bit into my head and neck, slicing into skin and crushing my windpipe. I felt something snap inside me. My limbs jerked, and the strikes attacking him caused him to drop me. My sight blurred, and the eternal slumber of death beckoned me. I heard tales of Lycans being called to the afterlife, with loud howls of other Lycans who had come before, yet none sang for me. Clinging to life, desperate for survival. It hurt, but not as much as the arrows fired into his back. He jerked upward with a loud bellow. a sharp backhand sending 2 of his knights flying and causing them to fall backward. He was a strong man, and thus an even stronger Lycan. One of these knights picked up his sword, driving the tip into the king's neck, and soon others joined him, stabbing into him with swords, while others held him in place with their halberds. It took multiple men to bring him down. I heard him being stabbed, and a ghastly, animalistic scream came from him. I stared, my face in a pool of blood, when I heard his final howl of agony. A passing regret coursed through me. I had been the cause of his death, his fear now realized. Red clouds circled the sky, and a blood moon peeked through, casting a warlike shadow over the land. I was unsure which god decided to cast their wrath on the people. The world drooled on around us, a moment in time that would never be lost. His corpse lay beside mine, the broken shafts of spears hanging from his body. The injuries returned him to a man. Without his fur, I could see the extent of the damage, and a surprisingly innocent look on his face. His lips moved. I'm uncertain what he was attempting to say. Yet I smiled. Nothing else mattered except him and I. Already those bitten were starting to turn. Fur came from their bodies, and the brutal first transformation caused some to die. I had a feeling it would happen. I ignored the chaos surrounding us, weapons protruding from his body, the final tremors of a life no more, and a vacant stare in his eyes. Half man, half Lycan. Deep down, he was always more of a man than a Lycan. And ultimately, it cost him all he held dear. My hand rested on his cheek. If we couldn't be together in life, we'd be together in death. I never noticed the change in myself. Each day I'd stare in the mirror while I brushed my teeth and did my beauty routine. The gradual process, always following the same procedure, brought me comfort at the start and end of each day. It started one night. My eyes both twitched at the same time, and I thought it was a reaction to the mascara. Whilst preparing for my latest date, a match on Tinder, who I spoke to for 3 weeks. Rashid, a handsome lawyer from a well-established law firm. The conversation was appealing, and despite my hesitancy, I won't deny there was chemistry. He was funny, interested in similar topics, and didn't mess me around. I did some digging into his background, checking to see if he was employed, and sure enough, his picture was there. One thing checked out. I checked his social media for any signs of a girlfriend or spouse. Finding none, I figured it was worth a shot. After going through the vetting process, I decided to allow him to take me out to dinner. Still cautious, given modern dating these days and with all the ghosting, fuckboys, and general lack of options, you understand my concern. Deciding on a relatively new place I've been wanting to try for a while. We arrived at the same time, and my eyes lit up at the sight of him. Rashid greeted me politely and opened the door for me. The restaurant was small, and we'd be sitting close to the other tables. It was packed. The latest hotspot in town, serving gimmicky meals and designer drinks. I think both of us would have preferred to go elsewhere, our knees touching under the table. the circular disc barely enough for our plates and drinks. Our hands would occasionally touch, and I feel the intimate quarters were by design. Ambient lighting lit up the place, with cobbled roads outside, under a moonlit sky. With the streetlights lit up in the fading rain, gave quite the impression. Easily able to overhear their conversations. Fortunately, there was no dramatic breakups to disturb our peace. He resembled his picture. No catfishing. He was of average height and build. What gained my attention was his calm, friendly demeanor. Our conversation flowed without pause. The pair of us had a few drinks each, only occasionally lifting our glasses to our lips. Leaning close, he told me I had beautiful eyes, and while I appreciated the compliment, it was certainly not the first time I heard it. I smiled, thanked him, and tried to move the topic to the next, when he asked if I put them to good use. This time, I was taken aback by his words, and asked what he meant by that. He told me of folklore revolving around the power of eyes. How a rare few, without incantation nor any other forms of spells, could use their gaze to influence others, to bless or to destroy, depending on their will. How it could be a blessing or a curse, depending on the person's morality. I had heard of the evil eye and how it could cause people's downfall, yet preferring science over superstition, I never thought much about it. He asked me to try, then gave a casual glance in the direction of a couple seated near us. Late teens, young love, before either of them suffered any noteworthy betrayal that would alter their view of love. They held hands, leaning close, and gazed lovingly into each other's eyes, even going as far as sharing a drink, each with their own straw, an anniversary card on the surface of their table. "What do you want me to try?" I whispered, only for him to tell me to pull them closer, more loving. After a quick, skeptical look, I turned my attention back to the couple, staring at them, imagining them leaning forward to kiss, and soon enough, they did. Their lips touched, gently and sweetly. My heart skipped a beat of excitement. I didn't believe it, but it was exciting to think it was possible. "Come on, look at them. They're clearly in love," I retorted. He shrugged and suggested yet another experiment, gesturing to them again, telling me instead to pull them apart, to cause discord amongst them. See if I was able to. I knew it wasn't fair of me to try to spoil their happiness. However, curiosity overrode feelings of privacy. I looked at them again, guided by him. It was harder this time, considering the bond they shared. Their joy radiated from them. A genuine love. I could feel the tension, brewing like a black smoke under the surface. Slow and steady, it grew until it caused the pair to pull away from each other, their hands withdrawn, and each pulled out their phones to start looking at them. Sure, they were younger, and the younger generations were increasingly attached to their phones, but it felt wrong. They frowned, tapping away at their screens, ignoring the other, and I glanced at him. He stared at me with dark, almond-shaped eyes, closer to black than brown. Full and high-arched black eyebrows framed with dark lashes. A large nose with prominent cheekbones. A short, clipped beard covered his jawline, and thick, black curls on his head, with only a few flecks of grey throughout the strands. He reminded me of the statues of long-lost kings of Persia, wise and filled with authority. Rashid told me I could fix it. Exhaling, filled with guilt, I looked at them again. It took a moment, and they each placed their phones on the table, started speaking again, and the tense moment passed, as though nothing had happened. Soon the two lovebirds were holding hands again, foreheads gently touching, and speaking softly to each other. "How?" I asked him, narrowing my eyes, mouth open in wonder, and he smirked, gently lifted his glass in a toast before drinking. Missing out on the reference and unsure why, the topic of conversation turned to our experiences, his international travels, places he saw and wished to see again. He seemed fascinated by the small town I grew up in. Unsure of his reason, our conversation flowed back to what our goals were, a potential future for the pair of us. Thus far, I was intrigued by him. After he paid, we walked down the streets to enjoy the cool night air, taking the sights of the city, and each of us pointed out parts that were memorable. I was growing sleepy, tried to discreetly yawn, and instantly Rashid noticed. He offered to drive me home, and I apologized, telling him I didn't know him well enough for that. Instead, he called me an Uber, opened the door for me, and told me he'd be seeing me soon, and to tell him when I got home safely. Getting in, I checked the time and noticed it was close to midnight. After paying, I got out and went into the parking lot that was deserted, and I kept a quick pace while I opened the front door, walking through the lobby and the elevator, rushing until reaching number 7, my apartment, and unlocked it and entered. My roommate, Sarah, was asleep, her faint snoring filling the lounge room, and I tossed my keys in the container, joining hers, locking the door behind me, taking my heels off, and alternating between legs, stretching my ankles, checking my phone. First, I texted my friend group chat, telling them I got home safe and it was good. Before they could respond, I gave Rashid a quick message and placed my phone down. I went into the bathroom, looking tired yet happy. It had been a good night, cleaning off my makeup and staring into my eyes. In truth, I noticed nothing different, other than some stubborn mascara that refused to budge. My eyes were hazel, a blend of green and brown, and they looked normal to me. Putting my phone on sleep mode, finishing my bedtime routine, I slipped under the covers and snuggled between the sheets. My dreams were normal, focusing on the tasks I conducted throughout the day. Some people have chaotic or even prophetic dreams. I'm not one of those people. When I woke up, I noticed I had a couple of messages. Some from the aforementioned group chat, one from my boss, some notifications, and one from Rashid. He thanked me for a lovely evening. I told him I had a great time and thanked him. I debated asking to see him again. No, it was too soon. Watching the 3 dots bounce for over a minute, my heart skipped a beat, and guessing Rashid was politely telling me how he wasn't interested in pursuing more. Instead, what I received were lengthy paragraphs of instruction on how to use my gifts, how to increase desire in others, thus bringing them close, how to pull them apart using the whispers inside their minds, and the more advanced skills, how to slow down time, how to survive, and finally, how to kill. The choice for good or evil was at my discretion, a divine test, as it were, and he would visit me many long years from now to see how I fared. He cautioned me that not everyone would understand these gifts, or would attempt to force me to use them for their own gain, and my detriment. The 3 dots appeared, jumped for a while, and a message appeared. I will see you in 50 years. Staring at the text in disbelief. Surely there had to be a better way to reject me than this. And before I had a chance to reply, to tell him this was cruel, I noticed I couldn't send a message. Blocked. I checked Tinder too. The profile was deleted. Trying to find any new messages, resulting in nothing being found. It showed I visited that restaurant, yet there was no proof. The conversations too had disappeared, as though Rashid never existed. I covered my mouth in bewilderment, knowing full well I met with a man last night, and had what I believed was a successful date. I messaged the group chat, telling them what just happened, and asked if this had ever occurred to them. Sure, they had been ghosted in the past or rejected, but a fantasy like this was incredibly far-fetched. They asked for his profile name and I sent it. His gram and Facebook, both were gone. Suddenly I remembered the law firm where he worked, and there too, he was gone. Now there was sudden confusion amongst us. They remembered him, so no one's memory was at fault. It was understandable how social media pages could be deleted or hidden in a short space of time. But to have your employment altered? It was extreme. I debated emailing them to see if he was valid. I tried looking the firm up on the Wayback Machine only to find, again, nothing. Months passed with no issues, and I decided to put the dating sites aside for the time being. My friends and I joked about the stranger who told me I had incredible eyes. It was an entertaining tale to share over drinks, have a laugh, and soon I forgot about it. My car was at the mechanic, and thus I went on public transport. The local bus that blessedly took me from work to only 2 blocks away from my apartment. It is a mixed bag. Sometimes it is a pleasant trip, and other times it is awful. The bus was crowded. Fortunately, I was seated and closed my eyes with the foul aroma of BO right in my face. Zoning out, I ignored the obnoxious conversations happening around me. Children screeching, babies crying, some asshole who had their phone volume turned all the way up while listening to brain rot. And closing my eyes, I wish I prepared better. Some earphones. Staring out the window, attempting to disassociate, I closed my eyes and thought about how nice it would be if it were silent, quiet, peaceful. Leaning with my back on the window and stared out at them. A warm, near golden fuzzy feel surrounding them and luring them into a slumber. The man with the smelly armpits lowered his arm and chin rested on his chest. The sounds around us lowered. The devices flickered, and checking my own, I realized that the battery was being drained. 80%, then 50%, then 10%. An uneasy silence came over the entire bus. Smiling and exhaling, drawling it out, when the bus began to sway from side to side. The scraping sound told me we struck other cars, lifting paint up. Looking at the driver, he was flopped in his seat with his arms dangling. Being the only one alert on a bus that has now gone off-road through a park was terrifying. Holding my arms up and bracing for the inevitable crash. Fortunately, injuries were minimal. The driver woke up, confused and alarmed, unsure what happened. After a quick visit to the hospital for a checkup, I went home. There was a graze, red and purple on my face, just under my eyes, and some bruising from when I hit the bar. I had to keep the injury clean. Staring at my reflection, with the physical reward for using the ability, I noticed a gold speck, a dot on my iris. Leaning close and holding my eyelid apart, my sight wasn't negatively impacted in any way. An optometrist visit would have irritated me, and without serious reason to go, I wouldn't. I cleaned it and dabbed some antiseptic on the bruising, wincing when it stung. I searched the internet, going through YouTube, Reddit, Google, and even the more obscure ones. Had anyone encountered a man like Rashid? I found nothing. Most of what I did find sounded crazy. People believing they could stare at someone and stop their heart beating, or they would take control of their minds to force them to do something against their will. If I hadn't have experienced it, staring at my screen, it brought only questions and no answers. Idly, I reached out to pick up a piece of chocolate, my favorite snack, and place it in my mouth. It tasted bland. Days passed with nothing eventful occurring. I walked down into the lobby to pick up my mail when I noticed a trio of women standing in front of my mailbox. They were deeply engrossed by their conversation, leaving no room for me to speak, standing to one side and waiting for an opportune moment to excuse myself. "Excuse me. Sorry, I need to get to my mailbox." The trio looked at me like dirt under their shoe. A turned up top lip and a raised eyebrow of pure irritation. None of them moved. With a smug smirk, one turned back to continue their conversation, and the other two joined in after a disrespectful giggle. "Excuse me," I insisted. "I need to get to my mailbox. Please move." The leader, in the center, glared at me in agitation. Again, without thinking, I used Rashid's teaching, imagining a smoky shadow circling around them, growing thick, and moving inside their bodies. I imagined conflict between them, hidden and repressed jealousy of one of them flirting with their boyfriends in high school, all without being resolved. Suddenly she turned on one of her friends, grasping her hair and smacking the back of her head against the mailboxes. The loud thump struck, filling the large marble room and echoing throughout the building. A few other residents stared with their mouths ajar, this being the most dramatic event to ever occur at the apartment block, her friend attempting to pull her off during her flurry of anger. A fresh blood stain, with stray pieces of hair dribbled down, right over my locker. This time I felt no remorse for my actions. The security guard pulled them off, and I told them I didn't know what happened. Suddenly they just went crazy. Due to the crime stain, however, I couldn't access my mail. Going up to my room, I noticed I now had a yellow patch covering more of my iris. Blinking, hoping it would disappear, and finding it still there, I found out from my excited roommate that the injured woman had lived, but was in critical condition in hospital, and the other had been arrested. Going down the next day, the mailbox area had been cleaned of blood, and the neighbors were chatting about it. The latest piece of spicy gossip. Getting my mail, I wondered whether I should find balance with the ability. Do only one good deed and one bad deed. Keep it nice and even. Bills, bills, and a few more bills, until I found a white envelope with my name, Sophia, written in black cursive. I've never seen such beautiful handwriting. Opening it, a letter was inside, 3 pages. It was signed, Rashid. Walking to the elevator, mindlessly pressing the button and not paying attention to the people coming inside. I pressed the button to my floor. He told me he continued on his travels, seeking others who wished to change their lives, and decided to take pity on me. Feeling bad for leaving me in the dark without a true explanation, Rashid guided me, telling me to avoid having roommates, and set about protecting my living space. I opened a portal with my unholy abilities, and now they would see me. I'd forever be vulnerable. As I kept reading, not once did he tell me who they were. He warned me they looked like humans, similar to us, and only when they were about to attack, they'd reveal themselves. I need to place salt over my windowsill and under my floor at night, along with other rituals. The typical countdown ding of arriving at my stop and door opening caused me to step out. Walking to my door, the furthest one from the elevator, I noticed a couple was following me. Turning around, I immediately asked them, "Can I help you?" My tone suggesting I'd rather do anything else. The rather average-looking couple smiled and told me they were here to see Sarah, my roommate. One thing I both loved and hated about her. Sarah was a hermit. She never left the house and was a homebody. Her life was mostly online. There were never any visitors other than the rare visit from her sister, or during the Christmas holidays. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and locked it immediately. I didn't bother looking through the peephole and figured they were standing there. Opening the kitchen cupboards, taking out the salt, and leaving a line of it under the doorframe, I rushed to my room with the salt and gave it the same treatment. Closed the door behind me, sitting cross-legged on my bed, reading the letter close to my face, and it told me the gift would continue to grow. Use too much and it would attract them. Don't use it at all, and it would consume me. My senses would no longer belong to me, dissolve me into nothingness, leaving nothing but ash and smoke. In order to extend my life, I needed to kill as part of the alchemical exchange. He told me our kind walked the earth with the early humans, occasionally as guides, gods, and finally as demons. The founder of our kind refused to kneel, and thus, here we were. He told me he knew I'd been hesitant to use my new abilities, and told me to take confidence in them. That he, Rashid, was my long-lost ancestor many centuries past. Despite the genetic distance between us, knowing I'd been flirting with a relative was distasteful. He told me I was now part of a large extended family all over the world, ending the letter by signing his name. The next day I spoke to Sarah and told her she'd need to find somewhere else to live. I'd give her 3 months to find a place and give her back her bond. She was also welcome to take the bed and furniture in the room. She was upset but understood. Her family came over the following weekend and helped her move out. Staring inside the empty room was strange. Placing a circle of white pillar candles on the floor, as instructed, and wondered why I was conducting this ritual, one that made no sense to me. I set up the salt around the window, smaller bowls for herbs, raiding my kitchen. I need to purchase more, and in greater numbers. Setting up a copper set of scales. keeping them both empty. A gift from my grandmother I never used but kept in the apartment, marking one side with black texture and releasing it. The scale swayed back and forth. The empty side fell. Out of balance, remembering his words, I knew I needed to kill. I stared longingly at it and closed the door, not yet fully willing to embrace this part of my life. During my nightly routine, I noticed the yellow spreading, slowly surrounding my iris and claiming it for its own. Not once did Rashid tell me what I was. Physically, I didn't feel any different. The balance he spoke of would be difficult. The next day, with my car now returned to me, I got to work with no issues, and I parked my car, waiting for the glass door to open, granting me access to the building, and walked past the receptionist, straight to the elevator. With every step, I heard the conversations occurring around me, whispers of gossip and office politics where schemes lurked around every corner. Wincing, my eyes closed, and pinching the bridge of my nose. Standing around the water cooler, I saw the office harridans circling it, and attempting to draw people into their discussion. I couldn't imagine them being peaceful to anyone, and after the mailbox incident, it felt like low-hanging fruit. Already there was a darkness surrounding them. While thick as thieves, they held negativity. A foul taste filled my mouth, and instead I moved my gaze elsewhere. I saw two people from accounting, Susan and Jess. I didn't know either of them well, yet their attraction for each other was an unkept office secret. They stood, talking, awkward giggles, and always insisting they were just friends. Perhaps one good deed for the day was necessary? Staring at them, surrounding them with an equally warm glow, circling them. They moved closer to each other, the encouragement granting just enough courage to take the first step. It was up to them now. Moving to my desk, sitting down, and turning on my computer to sign into the work software. Logging into my calendar and finding nothing but pointless meetings that could have been emails. Starting the daily grind, tapping on the keys, and setting things up for the day. Occasionally I saw Rashid. Just a flash out of the corner of my eye, or a glimpse in the crowd. Never in the same place twice. Was he watching over me? The meeting was dull. My imagination claimed me, taking me to a time beyond, and therefore my focus wasn't on the dreary meeting. Like bored school children, we left and went back to our respective desks, sitting down and feeling drained. Thus far, I'd influenced a couple or group of people. Perhaps a single person would be interesting. Wanting to test my theory, I saw Trev, who had been publicly ripped into by my boss for a simple mistake to make. He was frowning, not speaking to anyone, and roughly shuffling his folders, trying to find a file that no longer mattered. Already angry, the emotion in place, focusing on him, and soon he was throwing things around the office, screaming how much he hated being here. The noise around the place was loud. The closest I could describe it would be the sound of a hive of bees, fluttering and buzzing with activity. Steadily it grew louder, until it was completely unbearable, and I knew it was time. I had to kill. Perhaps it was because the Karen at the mailbox had managed to pull through and hadn't actually died. Did I need to have the intention of killing them? Or did I have to murder them personally? Without questions being answered, I needed to experiment and record my findings. Needing to take a breather, I activated my brake and went outside. The silence was an instant relief. Exhaling and resting my back on the door, the temptation to smoke was intense. Luckily, I quit many long years ago, but if I was offered one, a figure offered one to me. But first, a clean-shaven man in office attire, and gratefully I accepted. Since my workplace didn't support their workers, frequent changes in staff were the norm. With a grateful smile, I took one and placed it between my lips as he held a lighter, letting me light up. Thanks, I inhaled, feeling a strange jolt throughout my body, and stared at the cigarette. Curious. It felt different. Can't say I've seen you here before. What department are you in? He gave me a lopsided, too wide smile, and I noticed his eyes were a bright yellow. Coughing, my hand around my throat as I gasped for air, dropping the cigarette on the pavement and backing up toward the door, all in the hopes of finding safety. I felt that same force around me, the shadows and smoke. My fingers tore at my throat, and I knew he was the source. I'd have to fear my own kind. Our eyes met, eyes locked on each other, feeling a burning spreading from my fingertips up my arms, and I didn't pull away. I imagined pain. All the agony returned to him, surrounding him. A blend of warmth and darkness, fire and smoke. I imagined pressure, intensely twisting and pulling, trying to grasp for any weakness. He was well guarded, experienced, and without concern. A single chip in his armor, so to speak, allowing me to pierce him, and I acted quickly to attack. His body twisted abnormally. His hands gripped his skull with fingers spread wide and piercing inside, tearing himself in two. Onlookers called the police and two tried to stop him, desperately trying to pry his hand off him. He fell backward, and I was sure I had assistance. How? I don't know. Like a heavy ocean wave, the feeling washed away, and leaving my senses cleansed of pain. His fingertips had pried into his skull, crushing and damaging his brain. It didn't matter how many people tried to pry his hands off. They curled inside and yanked as hard as he could, tearing his skull apart, causing the screams from those around me and leaving a still twitching corpse on the ground. Suddenly it went limp, and a slow, echoing breath escaped his body. The dreams of his death kept haunting me. Trembling, I rested my back on the wall in disbelief. 3 times now an incident happened. However, with no proof, the police were forced to let me go, and arriving back home to my silent apartment, the untold cost had begun to sink in. I'd have to be concerned about my own kind, and follow everything set forth before me. Staring in the mirror, I saw the gold had claimed the entire iris. The transformation now complete. My eye color forevermore. It changed my entire appearance. Occasionally when I ventured out into the world, I get questions about my striking and different eye color. Colors that once suited me no longer did, and the newfound gift no longer giving me caution. Whoever I killed, I absorbed part of their soul into me, and thus permitting them to live on in a way. His pride, whispers of aggression, soon blended into me. I'd have to kill again. and who knows how many lives I'd take before I saw Rashid once more. I hope you enjoy this story. What did you think of it? Let me know what you thought in the comments section down below. Don't forget to stab the like button, subscribe, hit the bell and leave a comment. This video is made with the support of my incredible channel members, Patreon subscribers and all my viewers. Thank you so much for supporting me. Don't forget to check out my social media accounts below, including my merch. Stay safe, my little spooklings. And remember, I'll be watching you.